welcome to my VA Dayton podcast coming to you from Dayton, Ohio. This is the show where we talk to veterans in the Central Ohio region to share their stories and share what's happening at the Dayton VA Medical Center. I'm Scott Leese, your host, with Greg Tucker. And we have with us today a veteran from the Dayton area, Jon McCance, an Air Force veteran and owner of a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Great to see you here today, Jon.
It's a pleasure to be here, Scott. Thank you very much.
And we are very pleased to have you with us today. Jon's going to tell us a lot about McCance Consulting Group, but before we do that, we're actually going to put you to the test.
Ruh-roh.
Yes, it's time to play Wait, don't tell me. I think I know that. The game where we put our guests to the test of their military knowledge.
Oh, goody.
And yes, absolutely. And a game where our listeners can play along to see if their minds are mired in mounds of military minutia like ours is. Are you ready to take that challenge?
Well, I don't think I have an option to it.
No, you don't. You're stuck. That's right. It's time to put you to the test here, Jon. So your first question of the day is, it's all about actor Jimmy Stewart. You know Jimmy Stewart?
I do.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Absolutely.
He retired from the Air Force. I don't know if anybody knows that or not, but he actually was an Air Force veteran. Do you know what rank he retired at? Would it be Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, Brigadier General, or Major General?
I am going to go with Brigadier General.
Correct answer. He knows his trivia. All right, that's the correct answer. And did you know what career he was actually in while he was in the Air Force?
He was a pilot.
He was a pilot, but also, do you know what he retired out as?
His job?
Yeah, what his job? What was he doing as a Brigadier General?
Well, I know he retired out of the Air Force Reserve.
Believe it or not, he was working for Secretary of the Air Force, Public Affairs.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we'll be talking a little bit more about public affairs because I think that's near and dear to Jon's heart. But yes, he retired as an Air Force Brigadier General working for Secretary of the Air Force, Public Affairs at the Pentagon. Okay, here's your next question. What year did the Air Force issue their first Santa Claus sighting? Now, do you know about the Santa Claus sightings?
Sure. That would be...
Would it be 1950,
okay.
1948, 1901, or 2000?
I'm going with 1950.
1950? Are you sure? That's your final answer?
Yes, it is.
It's the wrong answer. Oh, no. On December 24th, 1948,
Really?
the Air Force reported that one of their radars had detected, quote, one unidentified sleigh powered by 8 reindeer at 14,000 feet heading 180 miles an hour.
It's a heck of a tailwind.
That's right. Exactly. This was the one-time event promoted that is now famous yearly by NORAD as the Santa Claus tracker. So, your next question. You ready for this?
I am.
Okay. What event happens every year to honor Air Force legend Brigadier General Robin Olds? Now, I had no idea. This is a toughie. I got to admit. Here, I'm an Air Force veteran myself. I'd never heard of Brigadier General Robin Olds.
Oh,
but
wow. Okay,
is it
go ahead.
Facial Hair February, Mustache March, or No Shave November, or Jolly June?
Mustache March.
Why would you guess that?
Because I know that's the right answer.
It is the right answer. Triple Ace pilot and Air Force legend Robin Olds is widely recognized by his trademark mustache. In celebration of his defiance, servicemen in the Air Force grow mustaches during Mustache March as a good-natured protest against facial hair regulations. So what did he win, Greg?
Jon, you have won a set of 4 Dayton VA industrial strength chip clips designed by NASA's aerospace engineers to keep your chips crisp on your next stellar space journey or wherever you may be traveling in the near future. Compliments of the Dayton VA.
Well, thank you very much.
Not to be operated by children under 10.
Really? Wow.
Really? They are industrial strength.
They do look industrial.
Do not get your fingers caught in those.
Okay.
We warn everybody.
You know, those come in handy, so thank you for that.
They come in very handy. Yeah. One of our most popular items of the Dayton VA.
Who knew?
That's
Who
right.
knew?
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here before we come back and talk to John about his experience with his business.
Tonight, nearly 40,000 veterans across the country are homeless. These men and women have pledged to serve our nation, and now we must serve them. Landlords across the country have helped make significant progress in reducing veteran homelessness by making housing available, but there is more that we can do to bring our veterans home. Visit www.va.gov/homeless to see how you can get involved. And if you are a veteran and you are experiencing homelessness, please call 877-4AID-VET. Thank you.
And we're back with Jon McCance, an Air Force veteran and owner of McCance Consulting Group, which is a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Tell us, John, all about your organization.
Well, it's an interesting story how that evolved. I had come back from my active duty. I'm one of these Air Force careerists that have been active duty, reserve technician, back to active duty, bounce back and forth between active duty and reserve status in various forms. So I left the Pentagon in 2004, and I came back to reserve status. I had hurt, actually, that's why I'm a service-disabled veteran. I had banged up my ankle really badly while I was on active duty. And I had to come back and have some surgery and physical therapy. So I was parked, if you will, my personnel file. I was transferred to the Air Reserve Personnel Center until such time as the surgery was completed. So I needed food with my meals, so I dusted off my resume, put it out on the street, and I got hired rather quickly by AT&T Government Solutions. And I worked in the defense sector for AT&T here in Dayton. They have offices on Presidential Drive. They had two groups there at the time, a engineering group and an intelligence group. Well, at that time, this was 2005 through 2008. At that time, the AT&T was going through this merger with Singular and Bell South and several other companies. And I was actually hired and presented with my severance package all at the same time. And this was my first experience in the private sector.
Hired and fired?
No, I was just, okay. So I was hired, but during the hiring process, they also showed me my severance package. And I looked at the individual that was ultimately became my boss for the time I was with AT&T, and I said, I've been in a uniform since probably close to 20 years. And I said, so coming into the private sector, is this normal to get to get your offer and your goodbye package all at the same time? And he says, no. He says, but unfortunately, the way that AT&T works and the way that with this merger occurring, you're going to be considered part of the sales force. And unfortunately, once the merger's complete, you're going to be the junior guy in the sales force for AT&T. So we know that's coming. And as much as we'd like to say that you're going to survive that, you're not. So here's what you'll get. So sure enough, in 2008, called me up on the phone. He said, guess what? And I go, oh, I already know what you're going to say. He says, yeah, your package, your last day something in June. And then and that package basically was a 5 or 6 month package. So pretty much took through the majority of 2008. So again, I dust off my resume, and at that point, one of the things that had happened while at AT&T, pretty much throughout my entire Air Force career, all I carried was a secret clearance. Yeah. So working at AT&T, it was and they sponsored through the National Air and Space Intelligence Center a top secret SCI. So the silver lining of that experience was it upped my security clearance, and that is a significant jump in salary in the private sector when you can put on your resume you have an active security clearance, and especially if you have an active top secret, and then you add SCI, special compartmental information, on top of that. Honestly, that's about a $30,000 bump in salary right there alone. So that was.
And you had that as a salesperson.
Well, I really wasn't a salesperson, but yeah, the construct within AT&T was to, if they didn't know where to put you, they put you in sales. They had acquired the government solutions practice about 4 years earlier because they wanted more government work. So they basically bought a company in Northern Virginia, and that then became AT&T Government Solutions. Well, then they infuse it with all these individuals from the corporate AT&T world that know little or nothing about government contract work. So they hired people that did understand that, could speak the tribal language, did understand what the programs were and things like that. There was no plug and play where to put these people other than say, okay, we'll make them sales. So I was a salesperson with a top secret SCI clearance. We had our customer base was heavily the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, and then we had some work with the Air Force Research Lab, and we had one person that was working over at the Air Force Institute of Technology. Anyway, that ended. I actually went to Greene County to and talked to the veterans office there. They helped me tweak my resume a little bit, and then I put it on the social media platforms that you put resumes on. Like I said, June, I was done at AT&T, and by about the end of June, I started getting hits from a headhunter. Turned out to be a company, Schaefer Corporation, which is a privately owned at the time, employee-owned small business. Now, the granted, small business was 200 people, but they were in Albuquerque, Washington, D.C., and Chelmsford, Massachusetts. We had a very small office in Dayton, and they hired me to be the marketing guy. So, again, kind of the majority of our work was NASIC, National Air and Space Intelligence Center. We had one person at AFIT, and we had a contract with the what is the Life Cycle Management Center now for the Air Force. And that went on until 2012, and then sequestration hit. So they award you a contract, and they'll give you, but then they'll issue you a task order on that contract. And the task order is for usually no more than 12 months. So I had about 14 people that worked for me there at Schaefer in Dayton. And of those 14, the 11 of them were PhDs. They were literally rocket scientists. I mean, really rocket scientists. Couldn't understand how to make coffee, but they could tell you within a meter or two where a ballistic missile from North Korea was going to land, but yeah. So anyway, and if you guys are listening to this, yeah, I'm right. So they hired me to do marketing. And then 6 months into that, the GM comes in and he said, what would you think about being a general manager? And I'm going, kind of looked over my shoulder at him. And I said, where are you going? He said, well, we actually hired you to replace me because the one thing that happened 2012, 2013. So this was the fall of 2012. January 2013, the employee-owned company was sold. They sold themselves in December of 2012. And he more or less became a millionaire overnight because he had been with the company so long and it was so vested in the company that, boom, he said, I don't have to work anymore. Well, good for you.
Shucks.
Yeah, God, congratulations. So, but the bad part of that, losing that employee-owned small business, mom and pop kind of philosophy, if you will, of a company when you're looking for government contracts, that's a huge jump. That's a huge deal because the government wants to support small businesses. They want employee-owned businesses, things like that. So the really bad part of what happened on January 1st of 2013, as far as Schaefer's concerned, specifically in Dayton, Ohio, is that we went from a small business employee-owned company to a subsidiary of the Metalmark company, which is a holding company out of the East Coast, which is part of the Citigroup. So we went from small business to a behemoth, company like Citigroup. So Doug comes in and he says, hey, I don't have to work anymore. So sequestration's going on, and so now we're competing at a much different level. We're competing as, we're competing like General Electric or McDonnell Douglas or, whomever for these contract opportunities. And I'm looking at the task orders for these 11 really smart individuals. Not that the other 3 weren't smart, but different levels. I'm looking at when the task orders are going to end, and I understand enough about the budget cycle for the Air Force. And now you overlay that with the sequestration threat and what the government agencies were doing. Understandably, the government agencies had to keep their own people employed. So they're looking at, contracts are dying on the vine. So I talked to my boss at the time out in Albuquerque, and I said, "Listen, we're going to be out of airspeed and altitude by September." So he said, "They'll figure it out." And I went, "Yeah, I know, but okay." So come August, I was right, he was wrong, and I was told to shut down the office, and I had to lay off a bunch of people. Unfortunately, the government had already put their arms around a couple of these people and told them, "Hey, we really like your work." They're literally national resources, some of these individuals, and we would like you to come to work for the government. And oh, by the way, your contract's ending. So, they like food with their meals. So that's the direction they went. At the end of the day, there were only about 3 people that were uncovered, if you will, of that group of 11, and I helped them subsequently as the year went on. After that, I helped them find jobs as well. So really, there was only one person that really was on the street, if you will. So we shut down the office in September, and then it wasn't 2 weeks that I got a call from a local contractor in Dayton and said, "Hey, sorry to hear about Schaefer, but we're really, really interested in you, and we'd like you to come talk to us." So I go and I talk to him, and I said, "Would you consider consulting to us?" I'm going, "Well, I can barely spell consultant." So, I was very clear about it that, I don't know what you're asking me to do. So here's the deal. Let me go off and talk with some individuals here in the Dayton market that do consulting, that I value their judgment and their opinions, and then let's meet in another week or two. And they said, perfectly fine. So we did that. I did that. I met with a couple of people that I trusted their opinions, very much so. And so went back in 2 weeks later, and I said, "Okay, I got it." Then that's when. Now here's my second positive experience with the VA, the big VA, is so now if I'm going to be a consultant, you got to file with the Secretary of State's office. You got to get an EIN. You got to come up with a name, and that's got to be registered. And oh, by the way, anything else you can do to make yourself attractive to the government's a good idea. So I'm
the many steps of starting a business that very few people are aware of. So I'm doing all that, and I get on the VA website and I apply for the Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business, and it all worked. It all worked fine. I have had nothing but good experiences with the VA, period. But in the course of a 6-month period, I went from 0 to having all the nomenclatures I could possibly get, and being a business. So I go into the company for the second meeting, and I said, "Okay, I know what I'm doing now. You're going to 1099 me, we're going to do it that way, and here's my EIN, and I'm ready to go." And they said, "Well, the pot of money, because of sequestration, the pot of money that we were going to use, it's been taken back by the larger company. Would you consider being a part-time employee?" And I went, well, at that point, now I'm getting towards the end of my severance package from Schaefer, so I'm thinking, okay. So I said yes, and they said, "Okay, right after the first of the year, we'll do that." So now we've gone through 2013, we're into 2014, and we went from 12 to 13 maybe. So I made it. I'm set up. I've got business cards. I'm in the community. I'm going to Dayton Defense. I'm going to the Miami Valley Military Affairs events. Well, I'm a past president of that. So, but I'm out there. Promotion circuit. Yeah. Have to get the word out about your business.
So I'm going along, and come the first year, we meet up again. They said we lost our money completely. Okay, well that's not good. So that was a very, I think I want to say this 2013 was a very lean year So for the first 6 months of 2013, I was basically unemployed. And it wasn't until May or June of 2013, almost simultaneously, the city of Dayton and Sinclair Community College reached out to me to establish contracts for me to become a liaison to those entities, both independent of each other, to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to improve the relationship between Sinclair and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, city of Dayton and Wright-Patterson Air Force. So I did that. I did that for about 12, 13 months of that. And then from that, I went to Wright State University under contract with them to help them secure the first presidential debate for 2016.
And so how many clients do you have now?
Right now I have one.
One? Okay, we'll edit that out.
No. That's fine. The reason why is, and they're really not a client. They started out that way, but so in talking to the veteran service officer from Montgomery County, who was filling in Greene County, so I go see him, and we're just chatting and talking about life and all the things I've done, and updating my resume and LinkedIn and all that stuff you're supposed to do when you're looking for a job. And so that went well. Didn't really, there wasn't anything immediate. So he calls me up about a week later and he says, listen, I know this is way out of your current experience, but I know we talked about this when you were a kid relative term, 19, 20, 21, that you worked with your uncle in the summers. I go, yeah, I did. My uncle was the fire chief and then the EMS chief for Houston. And they pretty well covered the southwest corner of Clark County. And when he retired from civil service, he started an ambulance service. And it was him and his son, my cousin. It was called Baker & Son Ambulance Service. And so anything you can possibly think of in the modern sense that an ambulance service might do, I did those things. So fast forward to this conversation with the VSO, and he said Newcomer Funeral Homes in Dayton is looking to consolidate their mortuary operation to a single location. They're going to call it a care center, and they're standing up this care center, and they think you would be a perfect guy to come in and help them do that. And he said, would you be interested in interviewing? I said, yeah, sure. Yeah. So I interviewed with the three folks from Newcomer and Beaver Creek and at their Beaver Creek Chapel. And I literally, not to blow sunshine up my skirt, but I wasn't out of the parking lot. They called me on the phone and says, you're hired. When can you start? So that's what I did. I was on the ground floor, if you will, of working with Newcomer to help them determine how, just providing consulting, but kind of doing it on a part-time basis as a part-time employee. And honestly, it was kind of nice because as a part-time employee, you don't have to worry about the 1099. You don't have to worry about the taxes. So I just kind of parked McCance Consulting Group. It wasn't that I wasn't looking, but I wasn't looking. I wasn't hungry to look. So it's been it's been 4 years with Newcomer. And they don't know this, but I was ready to go at the end of 2019. I had been there, done that, got the T-shirt kind of deal. The transportation routes were established, kind of the protocols within the care center were established, and things were humming along, So I went, okay, well now let's dust off the resume and see what's out there. And then and COVID hit. Mm. And these are some very dedicated individuals that work in funeral homes, and the morticians and the funeral directors. They're all hardworking. They're very focused on taking care of the families and doing the best they possibly can for the families and the deceased. but they didn't know much about pandemics. And I'm not saying I'm an expert.
And who did?
Right, exactly. But from a military perspective, and I think anybody that's had any uniform on in their life, if you've not spent any time in chemical warfare attire and understanding chemicals and stuff like that, then I don't know what part of the service you've been in. But at any rate, I had that kind of foundational knowledge of, biochem hazards and things, and how to isolate people and things, because it throughout my Air Force career, I had, although the biggest chunk of it was in public affairs, I was one of those guys that the commanders would typically turn around and say, "You're going to go do this." And yes, sir. And so there was a lot of deer in the headlights, kind of like, oh, what do we do now? So I rolled up my sleeves and helped wherever I could. I just did, there were certain tactical things, if you will, immediate things that we did to separate vehicles to make sure there's no possible transfer of any COVID virus from one vehicle to another vehicle. And because the vehicles we have, now we had 4 chapels in the Dayton market. So we had vehicles that are going to all 4 chapels. So the last thing you want to do is use that vehicle that's been contaminated maybe the night before by bringing a person into our care, and then they're taken out of that vehicle, and then we put whatever we put in the vehicle to go to any of those 4 locations. Now we could potentially contaminate the whole market. So anyway, that's early thinking. But the biggest, honestly, the biggest challenge, and probably one of the things that I'm most proud of is, other than working with a great group of people, they're a tremendous group of people. The second thing I'm proud of is we couldn't get PPE because we were not considered medical. And it took, you want to talk about pushing a wet noodle uphill, it took me probably 6 weeks.
And PPE, most people know that's personal protection equipment. So,
right.
But
Yeah, your N95s.
Exactly, the mask.
The gloves.
Which is why everyone was making them at one time, is that you could not get them.
Yeah. And so it became, I kind of hunkered down, said, I'm going to fix this. So it took about 3 weeks. And I had to call in some favors from friends of mine that were Kettering Health and other places. I mean, I literally, a friend of mine at Kettering Health had 24 N95 masks delivered to us, and I'm always grateful for that he would do that. And I don't feel comfortable sharing his name because I'm not sure he'd want me to. But that got us through until such a time that we could start to get. I mean, we're so far down on the priority list. I mean, restaurants were getting masks before we were getting masks, and it's like, okay, I got to fix this. So I tried every avenue I could think of, and then I finally thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to try Amazon. Try Amazon. Why not? And it took me about 10 days, but at the end of that 10-day period, the rest of the story was I fixed the problem. We became a higher priority. We were listed. We were considered a medical entity, and then the floodgates opened. We got all the PPE we could possibly want, and it kind of it did not just take care of us at Newcomer in Dayton, Ohio. Newcomer's a national company. They're in 30 states with over 120 chapels now. It helped the entire industry be able to get PPE. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that it took so long, though, because that is an essential service.
It's the end of life. It's end of life medical care. Exactly. And I agree.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll hear more from Jon about what he's doing in the Dayton area and his military career.
My name is Corporal Bradley Joseph Seitz.
Jerry Reed.
Kate Weber.
These are real veterans facing a real challenge.
I have PTSD.
And I have PTSD.
I have PTSD.
Post-traumatic stress disorder can happen to anyone.
I was still in a war zone in my mind.
But treatment can turn your life around.
Treatment has really saved my life.
To learn about PTSD and how treatment can help you, call your local VA medical center or visit ptsd.va.gov.
And we're back with Air Force veteran Jon McCance.
Hi.
Jon.
Yes.
Tell us, what was your calling to the military?
Well, okay. Let's start with my birth father was Air Force. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon how you want to go in this conversation. My mom and birth father divorced when I was very young, and we lived in Springfield, Ohio. So I lived with my grandmother and my aunt and my mom, and all three of them and my grandaunt and my uncle that I already mentioned, they all worked at Wright-Patterson. Now, my grandmother retired from Wright-Pat to take care of me, but the rest of them went to work at Wright-Patterson. So I had this connection to Wright-Patterson from a civilian perspective because, my mom and aunt and et cetera worked there. I was never on the base until my aunt married my uncle, and I'm knocking wood, and I know you heard that, but they're still with me, and they're in their 80s, and my uncle was a brand new, shiny second lieutenant navigator coming into the bomb wing here in B-52s, and that was my first experience at Wright-Patterson, coming out to the base, coming out to the open houses at Wright-Pat. I remember being one of the kids up on my uncle's shoulders in the grassy area across from where the golf course is on the flight line there and watching F-100s fly over our head at an insanely low altitude. Those were my early experiences, were my uncle dating my aunt. And to the point where we would come to about, he'd pick us up about, I don't know, he was there all the time. It was pretty clear, even for a 6-year-old, that they were going to get married. And we came to the base once. I just tell this story because I love this. We came to the base. He was in a bomb wing. We're hanging out. At the time, the Officers Club had 2 pools behind the building, and the Z pool was the heated pool. He literally and the other one's a straight pool, and it wasn't heated. It was the lap pool. He literally just picked me up and threw me and said swim in the Z pool, and I did. I swam like a fish. So apparently he had some sense that I wasn't going to.
That was your experience for learning how to swim.
Well, yeah. We had one of those little, not inflatable. It was one of those little
pools.
Aluminum with the lining, pool in the backyard, and it was basically nothing in a large bathtub. So I could swim around in there, and so that relationship grew. He went. He's very much a father figure to me. Bill Pantle's his name. And Bill went to Vietnam 3 times. He went twice in B-52s and once in C-123s. And he's one of my heroes, definitely. And then my mom remarried when I was about 8, and she married an Air Force officer, and his name's Bob Cortez. Unfortunately, he's passed. And we started to travel. We were here until I was about 12, and then we went to Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, and then Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii. When we were at Eglin, I went through 9th grade and 10th grade there, and that was my first opportunity to put a uniform on.
Did you go anywhere cold? I mean, you're going to Florida,
Negative.
and then you're going to Hawaii.
Not until I get into the career.
Okay.
Once I get into my career, I went to. Yeah,
okay.
I got stories to tell.
I was going to say, you had some plush assignments.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So we're down at Eglin, and most everybody knows this, but I'll tell it anyway. That when Jimmy Doolittle and the Doolittle Raiders were training to take off from the Hornet, the deck of the Hornet, they trained at Eglin, and they literally marked on the runway the deck length of the Hornet, and
better to practice there.
They practiced. They practiced and practiced and practiced. Right. And my junior ROTC instructor in 9th grade, freshman year, was Chief Master Sergeant Peacock, and he had been part of the maintenance team to help support the Doolittle Raiders at Eglin. You want to talk about a guy that could just silence an entire room. When he started telling stories, you're just like, if you have any interest pretty much in anything in the world, but specifically anything related to aviation or history, he was amazing. And he told stories about, that they would take off and they wouldn't make it. They would take off, they wouldn't make it. And they kept pulling equipment out. And finally they got it to the point. And they've made several movies that depict that now. But that was my first experience in a uniform. And, I was hooked at that point.
So we can fast forward first in your military career. Where are some of the places you've been?
22 countries around the world. Well, excuse me, militarily, 21 countries around the world. Probably, I've been to Georgetown, Guyana. Now, for those history buffs, if you remember back in the very late 70s,
Jim Jones was the instigator.
The instigator, yes. I apologize. We'll have to figure out who that congressman is. But so at this point, in this particular story, to go to Georgetown, Guyana, I was, one of the things I did in my Air Force career, I was in the Senate Liaison Office for the Air Force. I was the Deputy Chief of the Air Force Senate Liaison Office. So whenever you see a congressman or senator traveling somewhere in the world, there's a military officer with them. And there's usually one or two NCOs that are also with them. And they tend to pick from all the services. Every service has a liaison office on both the House and the Senate side. And there are favorites. I mean, when Senator McCain I was fortunate enough to meet him a number of times. Some people would say that would be an unfortunate experience, meeting John McCain, just because of his relationship with the Air Force. But that was part of the reason why I talked to John McCain a lot, because I didn't have that relationship, and that comes from the fellowship that I did before the stint in the liaison office. So anyway, when they travel around the world, they've got a military officer with them, and in this particular case, I was supporting Mike DeWine and Lincoln Chafee from Rhode Island, and we were traveling from Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. We went to Howard Air Force Base in Panama. We went to Cartagena, Colombia. Then we went to Georgetown, Guyana. And then we went to Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And then we went back to Andrews. And we did all that in 5 days. 5 days. So there's a lot, as you might imagine. You gotta coordinate with every embassy. You've got to work with the State Department. You've got to work with the diplomatic security. You've got to work with just pick an entity. So we ended up and this was Mike DeWine was leading the trip. Governor DeWine was leading the trip as Senator DeWine, and Lincoln Chafee was a guest of Senator DeWine. So I'm in DeWine's office, and I'd been a fellow for him, so we were pretty casual about this stuff. But we were in, and we were talking to the U.S. Ambassador to Guyana, and I'll never forget this. DeWine's sitting at his desk, and I'm in front of him, and we're on a conference call, and it's the speakerphone, of course. And the ambassador to Guyana says, Senator, this will be the first congressional delegation to come back since whatever the Congressman Jim Jones incident.
Ryan. I think it's Ryan.
Yeah, Congressman Ryan. Okay, we'll go with that. We'll go with it. Thank you. Since that delegation had come, and I'll never forget, the Senator Wine's head kind of snapped up, and he looked straight at me, and I give him a thumbs up, and he goes, "Okay, well, we're looking forward to it," So that was that particular instance, and it was like literally was like going back in time, because Guyana had been part of the British Empire at one point. And you land there, and there are cricket fields, and there's the children are out there, and they're playing in the white shirts and the long white baggy shorts with the knee socks on, and you're going, man, it was like going back in time.
So you are also a public affairs officer.
Sure.
And where were you stationed as a public affairs officer?
The entire time I was a public affairs officer, I was at Wright-Patterson. And that's interesting, I guess, in the sense that I graduated from college. I got a letter in the mail, and it was from the Air Force, Air University, Maxwell Air Force Base. We're starting Air Force ROTC. Would you be interested? And I go right down, sign up, boom, I'm in. So back to short hair, back to uniform on. Did that for my junior and senior year at Wright State, and that's how I got into the Air Force. I got a pilot slot. I went to pilot training. It was a 75% washout rate. I have some problems, some scar tissue in my inner ear and my left ear, which I was never made aware of how serious it was until I got to pilot training. And finally, they washed me out. I just couldn't keep up because I kept having sinus infections and things like that. And even the flight surgeon, nothing more debilitating than going in and seeing the flight surgeon and at the pilot training base and having him say, "You should have never made it here."
The pilot's largest nemesis.
Yeah.
Flight surgeon.
Yeah. So anyway, so I'm a little discouraged, and as you might imagine, and I'm coming back to Dayton, and I don't know what I'm going to do, and the Air Force is only offering me, you can be a personnel officer. They didn't even offer me public affairs because it was very hard to get in career field. There weren't any opens in Air Force active duty public affairs at the time, so it was either personnel or something else. I can't remember what the second one was. And I went, you know what? No, I'm not interested in either one of those. Let me try the reserve. So I called the base operator at Wright-Patterson. I said, could you connect me with the Air Force Reserve Unit? And they put me through. And this colonel answers the phone. I said, hello, sir. I'm Lieutenant McCance in Williams Air Force Base, Arizona. I just walked out of my faculty board, and I pretty well know the results. So I'm looking for an opportunity maybe to come into the reserve. And he said, well, tell me a little bit about the story. And I told him. He said, okay, well, we'll get you here. Let's get you here. So let's do a Palace chase, and we'll get the flight surgeon to look at you and see how bad this is. And thank you very much, sir. I'm very grateful, blah, blah, blah. Hang up the phone, do the Palace chase form. Boom. I'm transferred to the Air Force Reserve. I've got orders to go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and report to the 89th Fighter Squadron. Boy, those guys, they're going to be all over me about that. 89th Tactical Fighter Squadron at the time. That would have been 83. And so I show up, and I show up in blues. First mistake. No, not really. That's what you're supposed to do. So I show up in blues, and the secretary for the squadron, she says, "Who are you?" And I'm going, "Oh, this is yes, So I go over and report to the squadron commander, and he kind of looks up and he goes, "Who are you?" And I'm thinking, "Oh, this is not going well." And then I told him the story. Oh, yeah. I remember that. Yeah, I remember the colonel told me that. And so from there, it got much better really quick. And he said, well, the first thing you're going to do is you're not going to be here tomorrow in those blues. Go get yourself a flight suit right now. Thank you, sir. So I go get a flight suit and get the appropriate patches and everything and get a name tag in the works and things like that. So all was good. And the plan was to send me to UNT, undergraduate navigator school, because at the time the 89th Fighter Squadron and the 906 Tactical Fighter Group was flying the F-4D Phantom II, and they needed backseaters, and they wanted to put me in the backseat of the F-4. So I did do everything I was supposed to do. Flight surgeon saw me. Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that he says I've seen worse, certainly. I think the fact that there was such a high washout rate contributed to the fact that the flight surgeon erred in this direction that he erred. And I think we can get you a flight physical that you'd be able to go to UNT. I said, well, that's great news. So I'm a traditional reservist, and so meaning I'm part-time. And I'm doing that in 83, 84 timeframe, and that's actually when I came to work at Dayton Public Access, and I worked as the operations manager here during that time period. And then, and I'm flying. In 83, the squadron was deploying for a annual tour, the 2-week reserve training rotation, to Alpena, Michigan. And I went with the commander called me on the phone and said, hey, do you want to go run my base operations? We need somebody to do that. And I said, okay, I can do that. And so I went up there, ran base operations. We had A-10s. We had all kinds of different airplanes coming. It was not overwhelming. It was entertaining and fun, and I felt useful. And I got to fly. I actually flew twice while I was there. And that was kind of the turning point where they said, well, this guy can fly airplanes. We got to get him back in the cockpit. So all is well. Come back in 83, 84. The commander calls me and he says, I'm going to send you to Denfos. And I'm going, what the heck is DINFOS? And he says, that's the Defense Information School. It's over at Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis, and you're going to come back and you're going to be my public affairs officer. Okay, sir. And he says, in next year, you'll become an Air Reserve technician. You'll be my public affairs officer. And we're going to continue to fly you. And as long as we have the airplane, you'll get to fly in the airplane. That sounds like a great deal. So the bad news, kind of backing up and going, well, wait a minute, what happened to undergraduate navigator school was when I went in, he says, I got good news and bad news. I said, okay, well, what's the bad news? He says, we're getting F-16s and we're not sending anybody else to UNT because the F-16 is a single-seat fighter and it's a pilot. Basically the navigator went away. And I went, oh, that is bad news, sir. And he says, but. And then he said, you're going to go to DINFOS, you're going to be my public affairs officer, and as long as we have the airplane, you get to fly. And I go, okay, sir. I'm all aboard. So
absolutely.
Boom. That sounds like great news. I get good news and I get bad news, John.
Yeah.
Good news is a great story. Bad news is we had to get ready and go to break.
Okay.
Right.
But we'll be right back.
When I retired from the Air Force, I received my medical benefits for life through TRICARE. I didn't know I was also eligible for care through the VA, some of which I pay no copay for or an annual premium. Now I have options I didn't know I had before because of the Dayton VA.
Don't wait another day to see how the VA may help you.
I'm a vet, and it's my VA. Make it your VA today.
Call 937-268-6511, extension 2159 to enroll, or visit dayton.va.gov.
And we're back with Air Force veteran Jon McCance. John, so you're a public affairs officer,
right.
Not unlike Jimmy Stewart.
I would not put myself in the same category as Jimmy Stewart, but thank you.
But you got a connection there. You and Jimmy Stewart both. That's another trivia question for us down the road. What Dayton veteran was on caliber with Jimmy Stewart for being a public affairs officer? But tell us a little bit more about being a PA.
Okay, two quick stories. One was when as I mentioned, we were flying the F-4 at Wright-Patterson, and the 40th anniversary of breaking the sound barrier was coming up, and the decision was, way above our pay grades, that Chuck Yeager was going to fly across from Reno, Nevada in an RF-4, break the sound barrier at the exact time he broke this is all in October, break the sound barrier at the time that he broke the sound barrier some 40 years earlier. He was going to land at Wright-Patterson. He was going to spend one night at Wright-Pat. Then the Marines were going to pick him up in a Harrier, take him to some college in West Virginia. They were going to land on the square in this Harrier, have an event there, dedicate a building to Chuck Yeager, then fly back to Wright-Patterson, and then, so this was over a weekend. It wrapped around. He landed on Thursday, went.
Is this your brainchild? Did you come up with this schedule?
No. I'm just.
You're just responsible for making it happen.
I'm just responsible for making sure he got picked up at the airplane, put in the airplane, picked up at the airplane, put in quarters, and then say goodbye when he goes back to get in the RF-4 and go back to Reno.
And letting the world know about it at the same time.
Oh yeah, there was SAFPA was. I mean, the Secretary of the Air Force Office of Public Affairs was involved. There were a bunch of people involved in this. So my unit commander for the 906 Fighter Group asked me, said, we want you to be the officer to take care of General Yeager. And I went, well, okay, really? So he comes in, he lands, get him to quarters. Of course he was, he would put him in a suite, and he said, this suite is bigger than my entire house was in West Virginia. He was just laid back, and I have nothing but good experience with this. So he came, he went. There's two pieces of this. When he was leaving to go to West Virginia, he goes out to the airplane. Of course, it's a Marine Corps, and it's a Marine Corps instructor pilot that's going to fly with him. Operative word is fly with him, not fly him, fly with him. So they're getting ready to climb in the airplane. And General Yeager climbs up, and he plops himself down right in that front seat. And the Marine major, looks at me, and keep in mind I'm a first lieutenant at this point. He looks at me, and he goes, I said, sir, over to you, man. I got nothing. He says, I guess I'm flying in the back seat.
Yeah. Jaeger's co-pilot to no one.
So that's the first story. And then the second, fast forward to when we get an F-16. So this is 89 to 94. I think it was about 92, 93. We're at Nellis Air Force Base for Gunsmoke. And I'm not, my unit's not. I was deployed to support the public affairs function there. And
so you might want to tell everybody what Gunsmoke is.
Gunsmoke is the Air Combat Command's fighter bomber competition. It's each unit, units are selected across the active duty, the Guard, Reserve to attend Gunsmoke and to participate in fighter, in bomber, air-to-air combat, gunnery. All those things are all competitive, and it lasts about 3 weeks. So,
and is that not in an international competition?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's other air forces from around the world.
Right.
Also
Good
involved.
point. I can't remember who all was there, but it's 3 weeks, and a lot of people were in Las Vegas at Nellis Air Force Base. So at the time, Neil Armstrong was doing this. I think it was in the second season. I'm not even sure what network this was, but he was doing an aviation show. And the field producer came. Well, let me back up a little bit. So each team that was competing in Gunsmoke had a public affairs component. So there was usually maybe a second lieutenant, first lieutenant, and I'm a major now. Second lieutenant, first lieutenant, and then there's a senior, a mid-level NCO, maybe a staff or a master sergeant that are there to support their individual team. Their responsibility is to do a story every day about their team and how they're doing and pictures and stuff like that. Well, the public affairs officer in charge of Gunsmoke was the Fire Weapons Center Public Affairs active duty guy, but he was off doing a daily live cable cast of the competition. So he'd be inviting people in and talking about how they're doing and this, that, and the other. So the day-to-day operation was kind of up to me. So it's humming along pretty good. Everybody's doing their stories because if they didn't do their stories, then they got points taken off. And if they got points taken off, then that impacted the team. So nobody in public affairs wanted to be responsible for not doing what they're supposed to do. So they were all doing their thing. And so this field producer comes to me and he says, do you think you might have some time to talk to Neil Armstrong? And I went, well, let me see what I said. Are you kidding me?
Clear my calendar.
Yeah. Are you kidding me? I'm from Ohio. First of all, let's start with that. And the man walked on the moon. Of course I can talk to Neil Armstrong. So we went into the snack bar area there at the Fire Weapons Center, and he introduced himself. Very, very, I don't want to say, he's just very laid back, very low key, almost bashful to a point. And we sit down, and he says, I'm out here doing this show, and he said, during the evolution of the fighter world, I was in flight test, and I didn't get to experience a lot of the evolution of the airplanes that are out here today. He said, do you think you could you give me a crash course on the evolution of fighter technology from post-Korea all the way up to the present? And I went, yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we went from near parity in the went from near parity in the F-86 in Korea to fast forward to the F-15 air superiority fighter. And I went through the 100 series, I went through F-4, F-16, F-15, and it was an hour and a half. I sat there with Neil Armstrong for an hour and a half. Did I think to get somebody to take a picture of that? No, never did. So I didn't ask for. I would never ask for an autograph, but I didn't ask for an autograph. So
I would have.
So
I would have taken that opportunity.
The end of the end of the story is, so I go on about his business. He goes on about his business. 6 weeks later, I get a tape in the mail. This is VHS tape at this time. I get a tape in the mail of that show. I'm listed as a technical advisor in the credits, and a handwritten note from Neil Armstrong thanking me. So okay, those are short version stories. I have many stories, but we're out of time.
Every public affairs officer does. But we also want to talk to you about your arm. Right now, we're sitting across from you, and I see you've got a wing and a sling here.
I do.
So tell us a little bit about that. I understand that you went out to the VA and had some work done on your shoulder.
Absolutely. This is my second shoulder replacement surgery. Surgery at the Dayton VA for my shoulder. This is a total replacement. In this particular case, it's my right arm, which I'm left-handed. Not that really plays into it that much, but it's a reverse replacement. So as opposed to be anatomically correct, where the bone at the top of your arm would be the ball, and the rotator cuff would be part of your shoulder blade.
That's like 5 muscles over. Well, a lot of people don't know what a rotator cuff is. It's actually like 5 muscles that are joined together or in combination that comprise the rotator cuff.
Yeah. And then, so this is reverse. So the ball was attached to my shoulder blade, and then the artificial rotator cuff was attached to the prosthetic that actually goes into my arm. And this is the second one I've had. I retired. I retired in 2010. I was retired in 2010 because the surgery and everything and the recovery from my ankle surgery took so long. The rehab and all that took so long that I basically missed my promotion opportunities to full colonel. So I retired out of the Air Reserve Personnel Center in 2010.
And how did you find out about the VA after that?
Okay, it was before. So when I was leaving active duty in 2004, I don't want to beat up too much on military medicine, but I have to beat up a little bit on military medicine. The De Lorenzo Clinic at the Pentagon was taking care of me. I had hurt my ankle while I was. This is not there's no Rambo here. I was walking to work, leaving Union Station in Washington, walking up the hill to the Russell Senate building when I was the deputy chief of the Senate Liaison Office. It was a rainy day. There were some granite pavers that I was kind of at the edge while we were waiting for traffic. It was the morning rush to walk up the hill. And my left foot and ankle rolled off of the paver, and I heard it pop. And I knew, having played enough football, it never happened to me, but I'd heard people's appendages pop. So I knew it wasn't good. And it wasn't. But because of my advanced age, the particular people, now keep in mind I was 42 at the time, and I made lieutenant colonel up there, so I was still a major when this happened, I think. Maybe not. It's not that important. So I went to the clinic, and because of my advanced age, they said, well, it's just a bad sprain, and you're going to, it's going to take extra time to heal. So, Tylenol, wrap, stuff like that. And at the time, the Air Force had this bicycle physical training thing.
Oh, yes, I remember it well.
Yeah, and every time I did it, my ankle would blow up like a grapefruit, and I'd hurt, and I'd barely make it, and, it was bad. So I'm leaving the Pentagon in 2004. I'm out processing. I had complained enough that they sent me over to Andrews to get an MRI. But the communication was, if you don't hear from us, it's just a sprain. Bad on me for not being a little more aggressive on that. But anyway, about 6 months later, I'm out processing from the Pentagon, and I'm at the De Lorenzo Clinic. It's an Army major that's looking at out processing me. And, he's going, well, sir, is there anything else? And I said, well, I never really did anything satisfaction on my ankle. I mean, it still hurts. There's something, I know I'm old, but I'm not this old. He says, well, tell me about it. And he says, I went x-rays, advanced stage, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I went to get the MRI at Andrews, and they said, if you don't hear from us, it's just your ankle. It's just a hard sprain. So he says, well, let me pull that up. And he pulls it up. He didn't even say a word to me. He gets on the phone, and the next thing I know, now I've got the 06 clinic commander looking at the results of the MRI, talking to him and going, you must have an extremely high tolerance for pain. I'm going, well, I guess maybe so. He says, you got a bone spur, ganglion cyst, torn tendon, torn ligament, all in that ankle. You shouldn't even be able to walk. We got to get you into Bethesda. And I said, whoa, we got guys coming back from the war. I can go back to Wright-Patterson and get this done. He says, no, we're going to do this now. And so it's the colonel telling the lieutenant colonel, okay, sir. So and then he tells the major, get Bethesda on the phone. So he gets Bethesda on the phone, and Bethesda's saying, when's he leaving? When's he going back to Ohio? Or when's he coming off active duty, blah, blah, blah. And it just wasn't going to fit to get me into surgery. So they gave me a continuation of care, made me go, they didn't make me, they sent me to Wright-Patterson Medical Center. I see a captain there, very knowledgeable young man, in orthopedics. He looks at the x-rays. He goes, man, he says, is there any chance you're going to go back? Because at this time, the TRICARE regions were separated and firewalled. So we weren't in the same TRICARE region as Andrews. So he couldn't see the MRI. He says, is there any chance you're going back anytime soon? As a matter of fact, I am. I'm going back for a conference. And he said, bring the MRI back. So I did. He looks at it, and he says, sir, we can't do this. We don't have a skill set. He says, we're going to send you off base, and you're going to get treated by a sports medicine orthopedic surgeon that's going to put your ankle back together. And I go, okay. And he says, now you need to go downstairs. And I'm going, where? He says, down the basement. And I'm going, what for? He says, you need to go down and apply for VA. So I went, really? He goes, yeah, you need to do that, like now. Okay. So I went down, I applied for the VA, and the rest is history. I've been I've had nothing but the best service possible. And saw my surgeon after this surgery, this most recent surgery, was down in the pharmacy. And there was a guy there, he was complaining, I've been here for hours, blah, blah, blah. And, and I wanted so much to start and engage, but I thought, you know what? This is going to be a half an hour, 45 minutes of trying to talk this guy down from the fact that the VA, is wasting his time.
Right.
But I can tell you, I don't know what branch of service that individual was or whatever else he did in the military, but the experience I've had at the VA, the time that you have to wait is minimal. The service is great, and I literally at this point, I've got TRICARE for life, I've got Medicare, I've got Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. I could go anywhere in the world for medical care, and I'm not. I'm going to the VA, and that's for a very good reason.
Great story. Well, John, thank you so much for sharing all that with us. We thank you for your service, and we thank you for
absolutely welcome
all your great stories here with us today.
Thanks.
We've been talking with Air Force veteran Jon McCance. Again, we want to thank John for his time today and all the wonderful stories he shared with us here and his experience at the Dayton VA Medical Center.
When I retired from the Air Force, I received my medical benefits for life through TRICARE. I didn't know I was also eligible for care through the VA, some of which I pay no copay for or an annual premium. Now I have options I didn't know I had before because of the Dayton VA.
Don't wait another day to see how the VA may help you.
I'm a vet, and it's my VA. Make it your VA today.
Call 937-268-6511, extension 2159 to enroll, or visit dayton.va.gov.
And that's going to wrap up this session of My VA Dayton. Thank you for listening. We want to hear from you. Love to hear your story. So if you are a vet or you know of a vet with an interesting story to share, email us at myvadayton@va.gov. So until next time, I'm Scott Leese.
I'm Greg Tucker.
This is My VA Dayton.